What up, my friends? Welcome back to my channel. In today's video, we're doing one of my favorite videos, which is where I just sit down and chat about the books that I read. I read 12 books in the month of April, and I'm going to go over all of them with you. We're going to do spoiler-free reviews, but I'll give my honest thoughts on all of them. I give a star rating as well as a spice rating, and I let you know if there's any triggers or any content that I think you should be aware of before heading into the books. I'll also share my top 3 picks from the books that I read. That way, if you're headed to the library or your favorite independent bookstore, you can make a little listy list of the books that you know your friend Kate says is a must read. I always say that I don't have a specific rating scale when it comes to both the star rating and the spice rating. I've been reading consistently for about 3 years now, and I think that I'm finally at a point where I do have a little bit of a strategy when it comes to how I rate things. So I do want to take a couple of minutes to go over how I rate the books. That way, while you're watching the book recommendations or the book reviews, you'll have an idea on what my rating scale is. I do want to include a timestamp on the screen here though. If you're not interested in hearing this, although it should be pretty quick, you can just skip right ahead to the very first book review. So my rating system when it comes to books, I do a scale of 1 to 5 for stars. There's always that option to not to finish a book. So sometimes I will share with you guys a D and F book, which is did not finish. The only time I give a rating to a book that I did not finish is if there's something that I really think people should be aware of about that particular book. For example, there was one time where I did not finish a book and I gave it a 1-star rating on Goodreads, and it was because they were glorifying driving while intoxicated, and that I thought was incredibly inappropriate, so I gave it a 1-star rating. Otherwise, if I don't finish a book, it might not be the book's fault. It could just be the mood that I was in, or it could be just the wrong book for me. So I don't feel like it's right to read a book that I didn't finish unless there's something alarming, because of the fact that I didn't get to read all of the content and give it the chance that it deserves. Now, if I do rate something a 1-star, that means I did not enjoy it whatsoever. There was nothing redeeming about the book, and it was very difficult for me to finish. The only reason why I even stick it out with those 1-star ones is because I generally think that there's something like looming in the background, whether it be a mystery element or suspense or something that keeps me in the book. But generally, by the time I get to that point, the book has not redeemed itself to go above a 1-star. For 2-star, it means that I didn't enjoy it, but it might just be a compatibility issue. So it might be something someone else would enjoy, but it's not something that I would recommend. A 3-star would be one that I thought was okay. I might recommend it to people knowing that they like a particular trope or a specific genre or a specific writing style. That a lot of times happens to me with, say, a book that's written with very little dialogue. I'm the type of person who likes heavy dialogue in a book. I have some friends that like limited dialogue. So if I read something that had limited dialogue and maybe I gave it a 3-star, I would still recommend it to them knowing that that was their style. And maybe the writing was really good, but we just weren't compatible together. You know, me and the book, we just didn't jive. A 4-star book for me is something that I really, really enjoyed and would 100% recommend. There's just usually some missing elements that I have constructive feedback on that keep it from being a 5-star, but nothing that would stop me from recommending it to someone else. I also do sometimes do a 2.5 or a 3.5 star. And in those cases, it's just something in between a 2 and a 3 and something in between a 3 and a 4. I do a lot of 4.5 stars. And the reason why I do a lot of those is because there tend to be books that I really, really enjoy. I highly recommend picking them up, but I don't think they need to be at the top of the list. And there's usually 1 or 2 elements that held it back from being a full 5-star perfect read for me. So you'll see a lot of 4.5 stars from me because I want to make it clear that it's better than just enjoying it. I really loved it, but it's just something was missing to push it over the edge. Now, a 5-star for me means that I have absolutely no feedback. I thought that it was a perfect read. I think it's a must read. I will say that I'm a little harder on thrillers and historical fictions when it comes to giving out 5 stars because those have to really grip me and be super compelling. Romances, you'll see some 5 stars from me that maybe you don't think they're a 5-star, but romance tends to be like, if I got that ooey gooey butterfly swoon worthy feeling, I'm gonna give it a 5-star. I don't give it out to every romance I read, but I do have several 5 stars usually by the time the year has wrapped up. Now let's talk about my spice ratings. So spice ratings I think are subjective based on the type of spicy content that you've read. If you've only read a lot of closed door romance, which means that explicit scenes happen off of the pages, you may have a lower spice tolerance than I do, and I probably have a lower spice tolerance than somebody who reads a lot of dark romance. I have read some dark romance, but not a crazy amount, so my spice factor is kind of somewhere in the neutral zone. So there are some people out there that even kissing or flirting on the pages, they would consider that a 1 pepper spice rating. For me, I still think that's a 0 pepper. I think that having any explicit scenes in the book would get you a rating for spice. So let's go over the exact breakdown for my spice rating. So 0 peppers to me means that it's closed door, there's no spice. So whether that be like a historical fiction or a thriller that maybe just discusses the topic but doesn't have any explicit scenes, or romances that have mild kissing, flirting, but again, don't have any explicit scenes that happen on the pages, those would be a 0 out of 5 spice for me. Sometimes I will hand out a 0.5 pepper. 0.5 pepper would mean that it doesn't have explicit scenes, but I feel like they speak about the subject at a little bit of a more mature level. So I do kind of want to give a heads up because some people may not even want to have the discussion of the topic. So I do kind of use that as necessary. Next up would be a 1 pepper. So to me, it's going to have explicit scenes, but it's very mild. They're usually vanilla and there's not a lot of real estate taken up. So it's usually like 1 or 2 chapters or not even a full chapter. And it's easy to skip over. That's the biggest thing is I have some friends that are completely uncomfortable with spice. So I'll let them know it does contain spice, but the plot is not intertwined in it. So you can just skip that section if you need to, if you're not comfortable with spice. 2 pepper means that there is a little bit more real estate dedicated to the spicy scenes. The spice may start getting a little bit more moderate, if you will, instead of mild, and not as vanilla in the topic. Still not something that would stop most people from reading the book, just not as easy to skip over, but you probably could just skim through it if you wanted to. 3 peppers for me is very steamy, very detailed, usually contains some topics that are outside of the vanilla realm for sure, whether it just be a little bit more advanced or could be even starting to head into the darker territories. With a 3 pepper one, I think that the spice plays a major role in the novel, so you're gonna have some of the plot kind of weaved into it, so you can't skip over it as easy. Now 4 peppers to me is very steamy, very advanced content, could even be dipping into the taboo themes, if you will. The spicy scenes are really graphic, they're taking up a lot of real estate, the ones that you head into the book knowing that that's the primary reason you're reading it. And then 5 peppers for me is a highly graphic one, where they're definitely darker themes, definitely in the taboo area, can be considered controversial or triggering, and something I would recommend looking up trigger warnings for. Now, I don't dive into a lot that I would consider to be 5 pepper because you kind of know going into it, and I just know those books are not my favorite. Sometimes I'll read a thriller, and one of them is in this video, and that's kind of why I wanted to do this, where I want to warn people before heading in that there is very explicit and graphic details going on for a darker type theme, and you want to check the trigger warnings before you head into the book. I'm personally the type that likes like a 0 to a 2. I can do without spice, I can do with spice. I don't think there's anything shameful about it whatsoever. I'm just a very plot driven person, so generally when I'm reading, I'm doing so because I'm interested in the story and the characters and things like that. When I'm giving my spice ratings and even my star ratings, now you kind of understand where my mindset is. All right, so now we're going to dive into the reviews. These are all going to be spoiler free, but I will give a little summary about the book and then share some thoughts. I'll also give that star rating and the spice rating. I will, at the beginning of talking about the book and at the end of talking about the book, have a little graphic on the screen. That way, if you wanted to screenshot for later, you can. You can also just check the description box because I do put a full list every single time of all of the books that I read, and then that way you can just screenshot the list before you head off to the library or bookstore. So first book, I'm really excited. I started out the month super strong, and it was Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez. This one I gave a 4.5 out of 5 on stars, 0.5 out of 5 on peppers. So there is spice mentioned, but no explicit scenes. So this one follows Xavier and Samantha, who had a less than stellar first meeting, but end up recovering and having the most epic first date possible. But they cannot continue a relationship because Samantha is about to move to the West Coast and he is located in Minnesota. But after spending some time apart, they realize that they cannot be without each other and decide to give the long distance thing a chance. Here's the thing with this book. You have to be in a place where you can read a very somber romance. This is definitely not one of those feel good, like butterfly style romances where it's just like pure joy the whole time. There's some deeper themes happening here for sure for both of the main characters. Both Xavier and Samantha are dealing with some pretty traumatic situations that are happening. So it's definitely got that like melancholy vibe to it. But if you're looking for a book to just take you through the emotions and get a good cry out of, I mean, I'm a wuss, so I cry at a lot of things, so maybe you're stronger than me and you're not gonna cry, but for me personally, I was sobbing at sections of this book. The other thing about Abby's books, if you have not read any of her books yet, please go out and read it. Do yourself a favor. She definitely does a slower pace than I normally like. I'm usually like a quick romance type reader. She definitely takes you through it and you have to kind of like savor the pages as you're reading it, but she makes it so worth it. There's just something so special about her writing. I can't even get over it. I absolutely loved both Xavier and Samantha in this. I felt like they were so messy and raw and real, and those are my favorite style characters. They did not have their life together. This was not one of those situations where it's like they're able to just make things happen. It was like they're dealing with a long distance relationship. They both have financial constraints and they're really having to try to work through that, and it just felt so relatable. So I absolutely loved that. I just feel like if you're going through something and you are open to reading something that's a little bit more somber, there's a lot of healing messages in this. That one is definitely a recommend for me. Next up, I read Funny Story by Emily Henry. This one I gave a 4 out of 5 on stars and 1 out of 5 on spice. So in this one, Daphne has centered her entire life around her fiance. He's steady, he's dependable, he offers her the life that she's always dreamed of, but he completely shocks her by revealing that he figured out that he's in love with his childhood best friend. It turns out that she loves him back, and so she breaks up with her boyfriend, and then Daphne and her ex-boyfriend end up having to room together because they both financially cannot afford the breakups. Emily Henry is one of those writers that a lot of people are completely obsessed with, and I can kind of see why, but one of the things I always hear is that she writes such funny books, and I don't think her books are funny at all. I find them to be almost exhausting, and this one was incredibly exhausting. There are moments where there's like really good witty banter that happens that I was chuckling at, but there's so much back and forth in it that I just kind of wanted the characters to just make a decision. And the other thing is that their stories, the two main characters, Daphne and Miles, their stories are different in a way, but it had like an underlying theme. So as they're working through their emotions, there was a lot of overlap and it felt kind of repetitive. So it's kind of like I need the characters to be going through different things. So this book probably would have been like a 3 or a 3.5 if it wasn't for the setting of this book and how well the setting was written. It truly felt like I got to escape into this town, and it was like a summer vibe. And that part was just pure escapism, which is one of the reasons that I love to read. So that part really bumped it up for me. I do think that there's definitely a market out there for this book, and I think that there are plenty of people that would probably call it a 5-star. It is one that I would recommend reading, but it's one of those ones that I'm like, I don't think that you need to rush out as everybody else says. But overall, I think it's a really solid read. The next book that I read was Bridesmaid by Chance by Meghan Quinn. This one I gave a 3 out of 5 for both stars and spice. This one follows Hudson, who gets himself into a little bit of trouble with 3 women in his life when he makes a commitment because he is determined to win the trust of somebody he's trying to pull into his business. And his employee Sloan has to step up to help him make it happen. And in doing so, they have to face the attraction that they have for one another. I am really bummed about this book, you guys, because I am a huge Meghan Quinn fan, huge. But I have noticed that I tend to have a back and forth with her books lately, where if I love one, the next one I'm not gonna like, and then I'll love the next one and then not like the next one. It seems to be kind of like alternating for me. But I loved the first 2 books from this series, so I was so excited heading into this one, and it just did not deliver for me. I think the main problem for me is that Hudson, the main male character, was red flags all around. Just red flags the entire time. It just felt like he was so hot and cold. It wasn't the cute style grouchy that you want in a book, like those growling, grouchy alpha males. It wasn't like that. It was like insufferable grouchy. And then they were like bickering the entire book. Like they had, I don't know. It just didn't even seem like they liked each other. So it was hard for me to get past all of that. I think that the overall plot was really good. That's the part that was hard. So that's why it's like a 3 and not a 2. Me and this book, we're just not compatible at this time. I would, however, recommend reading the other 2 from the series. So there's Bridesmaid for Hire. That one was really good. And then Bridesmaid Undercover. All right, the next one that we have to talk about is Phantasma by Kaylie Smith. This one I give a 3.5 out of 5 for stars, 2 out of 5 for spice. So this one follows Ophelia, who is reeling from the loss of her mother. And she finds out that her sister has been keeping secrets from her her and ends up running off to enter a dangerous competition called Phantasma. She knows that her sister does not have the strength to compete in this, so she decides to step in and enter the competition herself to see if she can find her sister and convince her to go home. So what's weird with this book is I am usually the type of person that if I pick up a book, I'm just going to complete that book before I move on to the next one. This one I've actually been reading since November. And I could only do a couple chapters at a time. It's a very gothic, dark vibe. They call it dark romance, but I didn't even think, honestly, that the romance section was like super dark. I thought it was going to be like a 3 or 4 for spice, and really it was only like a 2 for me. It's very, very slow. I keep seeing this coming up on people's lists with like a lot of hype. I don't think it's worth the hype. I thought that it was good. It wasn't compelling enough. It wasn't gripping enough for me. I did enjoy the setting and like the gothic vibes. It's like New Orleans. There's some kind of like haunted elements going on that's happening. It did feel like overall familiar in terms of it being like a competition, kind of like a Hunger Games. I was very confused as to what exactly the mission was in the competition. So I kept rereading certain sections to try and figure out if I was just not paying attention enough or what happened, but I just never understood the actual purpose of the entire thing. By the end, it wraps up a little bit and a few of my questions get answered, and then there's actually a second book. It leaves you with enough intrigue to want to read the second book, but not like frustrating cliffhangers, so I do appreciate that. But overall, I was just kind of confused, and I never read other people's reviews until I've like locked mine in. And once I locked in my review, I just like browsed through other people's Goodreads reviews, and sure enough, it wasn't just me. There was a lot of people saying they were confused. So I don't know if there was opportunity in the writing to kind of let the readers know what that competition was all about, because it's like the main part of the book. Overall, I think that it's available on Kindle Unlimited. So if you have Kindle Unlimited, maybe it would be worth picking up if you're looking for a fantasy romance type vibe. I don't think it's one that you need to rush out for like some people make it out to be. All right, next up, this one actually released today. Today for you guys. I'm filming this a couple days in advance. I was sent an advance copy of this, and I'm providing my feedback completely voluntarily, and I always give an honest review even if a book is sent to me, because my integrity means way more to me than getting a digital copy of a book. This one is a spicy romance, Jilted by Vi Keeland. And this one I give a 4 out of 5 on stars, 2 out of 5 on spice. In this one, we have Sloane, who has always been a big fan of weddings, but lately she's felt a little bit more jaded because she was left at the altar herself. She ends up meeting a guy at a wedding named Wilder, and they end up having a little bit of a moment together in a coat closet. She ends up going into work and finding out that he's the boss's son. So now she has even more reason to keep her distance, but it's gonna be a little difficult to do that because they've been teamed up on a special project. I really enjoy Vi Keeland's books. She's one of those ones that you can rely on. She delivers chaos. It's predictable. You know, they're basically like spicy Hallmark books, which I appreciate because sometimes you don't want the anxiety of chasing a story. You know, sometimes you want to know what's about to happen, and that's definitely the case with her books. This one is a slow burn, but it didn't feel frustrating and it didn't feel like a lot of back and forth. It felt very natural. Vi Keeland tends to be more on the like spicy kind of, you know, people call them like guilty pleasure style. This one, I think she's starting to go a little bit more mainstream, like rom-com vibe, and I enjoyed the take on it. So overall, if you're looking for like a romance that you don't have to put a lot of mental energy to and you can just really sit back and enjoy it, this is one that I'd say you should pick up. Next up, we have a historical romance. This one is called Rescuing Lord Inglewood by Sally Britton. This one I give a 4 out of 5 on stars, 0 out of 5 on spice. This one follows Esther, who leaps into action when she sees a catastrophe about to go down, but it ends up leaving her in a compromised position with one of her brother's best friends. The solutions that people come up with on her behalf are not her first choice, but she's used to not having a say in her life, so she just goes along with it. This book is really, really sweet. I really enjoyed the way that the author wrote the characters. It's a super slow burn, but it made the relationship build in a much more authentic way, and it was easy for me to want to root on the relationship and root on the characters. I just loved Esther. I loved her growth in the book. And then I loved, I think his name was Silas, what Silas does to her and her confidence and the way that he reassures her. There's definitely miscommunication at play, but it felt accurate for the time frame. You know, feelings were not discussed as much and things like that. So the miscommunication made sense. It wasn't super frustrating. I just think overall this is one that if you like historical romance, I think it would be worth picking up. Next up, you guys, A Game of Hearts by Joanna Barker. This one is another historical romance, 4.5 out of 5 on Stars, 0 out of 5 on Spice. We have Marigold, and she's a talented archer who has spent years trying to make a name for herself in a sport dominated by men. She is getting so frustrated with all of the politics in trying to work herself into the sport that she announces to one of her rivals that she is going to start a society just for women in archery. One of her goals is actually to beat another rival that she has, but as she's starting to spend more time with him, she realizes that her hatred may be misplaced. Okay, this is what you guys need to know about me. Enemies to lovers is my favorite trope. I love enemies to lovers, and I think it's because my husband and I kind of started out as enemies to lovers when we were teenagers. That's a whole story. But anyways, enemies to lovers is my absolute favorite. But because it's my favorite, I'm super picky about it. This one was done so well because it was like true enemies to lovers, but the type where they still respect each other. So it's kind of like that rivalry style. They were not cruel to one another. They just didn't like each other. So it felt natural, but it didn't feel mean. You know what I'm saying? And the way that their relationship transitions from enemies to lovers was just divine. The other thing I loved about this one is the background characters. They ended up adding so much to this book. I loved the writing style. I loved the setting. I loved the time frame. It felt like a true escape. It gave me all the butterfly feelings that I'm looking for. There's just nothing like a really good historical romance. It just feels so timeless and so wonderful. I had never read anything from this author before, and she is going to be a new favorite of mine. So definitely recommend this one. If you're into historical romances, or if you're thinking about dipping your toes into it, this would be one I'd recommend. So I knew that I had read like a lot of romance, and I was like, hey, okay, we need to do something else. So I decided to go with a thriller that has been on my radar for a while. I'm in a few different Facebook groups when it comes to book recommendations, and one of them is a psychological thriller group. It's a genre that I only read usually 1 or 2 books a month of, so I kind of turned to that to get the recommendations, and this is one that there were hundreds of comments saying that this is a must read. This one is Still Missing by Chevy Stevens, and I gave it a 4 out of 5 on Stars, 5 out of 5 on Spice. This is one that inspired me to share how my rating scale works, because this one has some very dark topics, and I would check trigger warnings before reading it because there is a situation that happens. I don't want to give out spoilers, but you should definitely check trigger warnings before heading in. This one has Annie, who is a realtor who's doing an open house and ends up getting abducted. She spends a year in a remote cabin and finally escapes. And while the police are investigating her case, there's some other strange things that are going on. She's trying to find some sense of normalcy, but she's realizing that it's probably not going to happen. And her loved ones are having a hard time accepting the reality that she may never return to normal. Okay, so the thing with this book is it's incredibly straightforward, really simple to follow. It was not overcomplicated. There's not 10 million characters. The situation already took place. So it was different in terms of like, usually with a thriller, you're like leading up to an event. I felt like this one, the event happens and then you're in the after. I don't know if I'm explaining that well, but hopefully you guys know what I'm saying. So it's kind of like you're part of the investigation process. So it felt more true crime than thriller to me. I can see why people would love this book so much. I think the part that held me back from it being like a 5-star is that the book is told in therapy sessions. Annie is going to her therapist and telling her story. And there's not feedback happening from the therapist. It's all just from Annie's point of view. So it just felt a little strange to me because I don't understand why it needed to be told in a therapy session when it could have just been from Annie's point of view, if that makes sense. So that was the part that I didn't really like. I was like, okay, it's unique, but it's also kind of like bizarre, you know? I think the part that makes this such a good thriller and why I can see people being like, it's a must read, is because it's so believable. Like the entire story is like, this could happen to you or it could happen to someone you love. And it was a wild ride. There are some really good twists in it, some that I didn't see coming, and I'm usually good at picking up on twists. So overall, definitely one that I would recommend. But like I said, check out the trigger warnings and maybe you won't be as picky as me about the whole therapy session thing. Overall, definitely a solid thriller for sure. I have another Meghan Quinn to share with you. This one is called The Path to Loving Him. This one I gave a 4 out of 5 on Stars and then a 3 out of 5 on Spice. We have Gabby, who feels like she bombed an interview for assistant coach, and the person she's supposed to be the assistant coach for didn't even bother showing up to the interview. He was her brother's coach and mentor, and she goes to a bar that night to let off some steam from not doing so great at the interview, and he walks in and doesn't even recognize her. So she decides to take the opportunity to work through the attraction she used to feel towards him and have a one-night stand. This book was very unexpected to me because usually with Meghan Quinn's, I'm like cackling because she writes in a very like unhinged, chaotic way, and I'm usually like laughing out loud. These characters were not as unhinged or chaotic as I usually expect from her. There was definitely a little bit more emotional depth. I found myself crying quite a bit in this book, which is very odd for Meghan Quinn, for me at least. There's a lot that gets worked through, and it gets worked through really well. I like how the whole story plays out. There is a lot of filler in this book that is just like completely unnecessary, and there was a lot of repetition. The part that I did not love is that a lot of this book happens in text message conversations, which is just not my favorite. I like it to be more like live and in action dialogue. I don't mind if some text messages are in play because, hello, we're in 2025, so if I'm reading a contemporary romance, I have to expect that the way we text our friends and family would be happening to these characters as well. But I just felt like this one kind of like towed the line on excessive a little bit. But overall, if you're looking for like a solid romance, has some spice to it, this one definitely had a higher level spice. But there's a little bit of comedy, there's a lot of emotional stuff going on, and just overall, I think that it's a good one. Next up, I picked up Not Quite by the Book by Julie Hatcher. This one I gave a 3.5 out of 5 on stars, 0 out of 5 on spice. So in this book, we have Emma, who has been running herself ragged and no one around her seems to notice, and her parents unexpectedly announce that they're about to retire, and they pretty much just expect her to take over the bookshop, which she's really already running anyway. Before she steps into the inevitable role, she announces to her entire family that she's going to take 6 weeks off to rent out a manor and try to live like Emily Dickinson did in the 1800s. So if you like the movie You've Got Mail, or you like Emily Dickinson, you would probably love this. I loved the idea of this book. I loved the setting of this book. I'm originally from Massachusetts, and this is set in Amherst, Massachusetts. So for me, I think there was like almost a nostalgic feeling because I could really envision where she was staying and the type of manor that she was staying at and the estate she was staying at and all of that. I think that played a part in me liking this book the way I did. This one had a lot of dishonesty in it when it came to the romance. So I was more in it for the women's fiction aspect where Emma is working through her feelings with her family and working through her relationship with her family and doing kind of like self-discovery and things like that. That's what I was into in this book. The romance, actually, I didn't enjoy it at all because I just felt, like I said, there was so much dishonesty there that it was just kind of like red flags, and I didn't understand why romance was even happening the way that it was happening. Overall, if you're looking for kind of like a light, cozy read, and if you can kind of shelf that romance and you just want to dive into something where there's a little bit of a stepping back in time vibe without it being like time travel, this would be a good one to pick up. This one is To Charm a Lady by Joanna Barker. So I had read that other book about the archery from her, fell in love, and this is the next in the series. Also gave this one a 4.5 out of 5 on stars, 0 out of 5 on spice. So this one follows Cora, who is best friends with Marigold from the first book, and she's been in love with Marigold's brother Oliver for as long as she can remember. She's finally accepted the fact that he's never going to return her feelings, so she decides that she really needs to go out on her own and find somebody that will return her love. She finally has an opportunity to get away from her overbearing mother and Oliver, and she goes to an estate that she's been invited to try and find the man of her dreams. I know that I have found a new like must-read author with Joanna Barker. I actually loved this one even more than the first one, which I'm surprised I'm saying because I really, really liked that first one. I think the whole theme of unrequited love is just like a second favorite trope of mine, and the way that this one was handled was really, really great. I loved the way that Cora's confidence starts to build and the way that Oliver kind of discovers his feelings for her. It just felt like they both brought out the best in one another. She was pointing out to him that even though in his past he's been kind of rakish and flirtatious and didn't really have a sense of direction, it didn't mean he wasn't a good person, and it didn't mean that he hasn't had growth because he kind of has been chasing that reputation so long. Even his parents believed that reputation. They were such different people, but they really brought out the best in each other and just balanced each other out. And the setting in this book was just so beautiful. If you are looking for a historical romance, if you love them like I do, both of these are clean historical romances, no explicit scenes, but I didn't feel like anything was missing. It felt like the connection and the romance was so strong in these, and the chemistry was done so well. So I would definitely recommend picking up those books, and I'm excited to read more from her for sure. The final book, I don't know if you guys do this, but I love to pick up Christmas books even throughout the year. There's something, especially when the heat starts to get up, I kind of am like craving Christmas. So I decided to pick up a historical romance, and it's Christmas themed. It's called To Charm an Earl by Christmas. And this one was by Bridget Barton. This one I gave a 2 out of 5 on stars, 0 out of 5 on spice. In this one, Claire and Julian have spent years at odds with one another, despite their families being best friends. When they end up in a compromising position together, they're forced to announce an engagement that both of them are determined to find a way out of. I don't like to dog books, so I'll keep this as brief as I can. This was just not for me. It's an enemies to lovers, but it's, like I mentioned before, when it's an enemies to lovers, I need to feel like there's some level of respect for one another. And in this case, it didn't feel that way. It felt like they were just bickering the entire time. You never really like got that connection between them. I also went in wanting a Christmas novel, and there's like no Christmas vibes in this, despite it being in the name. Like, I feel like I had some false advertising there. So overall, not one that I'd recommend, and I don't plan to try and read others from this author. Okay, so that wraps up everything that I read in the month of April. So my top 3 picks were Say You'll Remember Me by Abby Jimenez, A Game of Hearts by Joanna Barker, and To Charm a Lady by Joanna Barker. All 3 of those are strong recommends for me. Would definitely go out and pick them up when you can. Okay, so now let's talk some of the books that I want to read in the month of May. I'm mostly a mood reader, so I keep only like a few that I want to read, and then other than that, I fill in with like new releases that come out that I forgot about, or books that just yell at me, or sometimes I'll be in one of those Facebook groups and I'll see like a strongly recommended one or something like that. But I do think, and I don't know, don't hold me to it, but I think that I want to try and reread Hunger Games, because I read them when I was like 17 and I'm 38 now. So it's been like 20 years. I also haven't seen the movies in probably 10 or 15 years. So I feel like I forget most of the plot. I remember really loving the Hunger Game books, and they recently released like a prequel. There's like 2 prequels that released. One was maybe a couple years ago. I never read that one. And then there's another new one that everybody's talking about. I kind of want to just reread the entire series. So I think I'm going to start with like just go in the order as it released and start with the original Hunger Games series. What do you guys think? Sound off down below. Should I do it? I also just got sent an early copy of a Christmas book from an author. So I'm currently reading that right now. I literally just like got into chapter 1 last night. So I'm going to read that Christmas book because I'm hoping to recover from the last Christmas book, you know? And then I also got Scythe and Sparrow from, I think it's Bryn Weaver. I might be making that up. It's from the Butcher and Blackbird series, and I did not really love Butcher and Blackbird, but I ended up loving Leather and Lark, and I heard Scythe and Sparrow is like the best of all of them, so I'm excited to dive into that one. I also have an Elsie Silver book called The Front Runner that I've been kind of putting off, and then there's another book called War Games that's supposed to be like a serial killer competition that I'm like, do I want to read that? Do I not want to read it? We'll see. So I might dive into that one just depending on my mood. If there are any other books that you think that I should read, please let me know down below, because I'm really trying to get back into like making reading a habit for myself. I was really good at it for a while, but then I kind of allowed productivity to take over. And then what happens is I'm really productive for like 2 weeks, and then I burn out. And then I'm like not productive for a week. Does that happen to anybody else? Because it's a problem. So I'm trying to get myself to understand that if I'm mostly productive, but allow myself a little bit of rest, then that lets me be productive for a more consistent amount of time, and then more gets done overall. That's what I'm trying to tell myself. Might be girl math, but that's fine. Please let me know if you've read anything awesome lately. If you end up enjoying this and you want more book content, I do have an Instagram completely dedicated to just books, so you can head over to that. It's at Kate Chapters. I always have it linked down below, and I'll put it up on the screen here. If you enjoyed my vibe, I usually do cooking videos. This is my passion project, if you will, where just once a month I share a little chatty chat about books, but I'm usually sharing my recent Costco finds, or sharing meal prep videos, or my favorite recipes. So if you are looking for more of that type of content, please feel free to check out the rest of my channel. I am happy to help you with your meal planning in case you need some inspiration. I hope I delivered whatever you needed when you clicked on that thumbnail, and I hope you have a magical day. Bye.